Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. So I started playing Genshin Impact around the time of its release, and one of my first thoughts after playing around with the elements system a bit was just how well the Avatar the Last Airbender characters would fit into the game. This is a pretty obvious crossover admittedly, but I haven't seen anyone else do it. So today we're going to be drawing some character designs and talking about what I think they could actually be like in-game. So without further ado, let's get into the designs. So of course I had to start us off with Aang, who naturally I gave an animo vision. However, I also think it would be really cool mechanically if he was a skin for the Traveler, so that he could actually switch elements on the fly. I ultimately decided to go in with the assumption though that he'd be strictly animo, since I thought it would be cooler if he had his own moveset. Personally, I also just can't picture Aang using a sword. The Traveler has never been my favorite character to play as anyways, especially with how you're made to switch elements. So for Aang's weapon, I actually decided to give him a polearm to mimic his glider. I know it's not so much a weapon as it is a tool in the show, but I think it fits in pretty well nonetheless. For his outfit, I kept the design rather simple since he is a monk, but I still tried to incorporate that Genshin flair and level of detail that their designs are known for, adding little details like the cloud pattern on his pants or a bit of trim along the sides of his robe. Here I am working on his polearm, which is by far the most intricate part of his design. The flared out spikes are meant to mimic the handles on his glider, but I also got a fair amount of inspiration from the Skyward Spear. I tried to make it look like something of a relic, but also what is potentially a powerful weapon. I decided to hang his vision from the handle, which I know wouldn't be possible in-game, but lore-wise, Barbara has hers on a book, which I assume is meant to be her catalyst. Either way, it looks cool, so who cares? So for his moveset, I imagine Aang in-game would be a total powerhouse, focusing strictly on elemental damage and creating reactions to swirl with other elements. For his Q skill, I wanted to incorporate the Avatar state, and my favorite thing about it in the show is how it essentially gives Aang this massive power boost, but he also has the risk of not reincarnating if he's killed. So I think Aang's Q would trigger the Avatar state, allowing him to deal massive elemental damage in the form of quick whirlwind attacks. However, this would also give him a big debuff to his defenses and max health. Basically, you would have to be really careful when and where you use this ability, since depending on the enemy or climate, his health could drain pretty quickly. I feel like in the newer Genshin updates, they're really trying to encourage the use of healers, so this could be another character that could benefit from that. Now I'm starting with the coloring, and of course I didn't want to change the characters' original color schemes to match their Genshin elements. However, I did try to incorporate the colors where I could, so they could still believably fit in with Genshin's design philosophy and tie in the visions. So for Aang, I kept the teal centralized on his weapon, air cycle, and tattoos. For Aang's E skill, I think it would be similar to Sayu's in that it would be a basic elemental attack, but when the button is held down, he zips around on his air scooter mowing down pedestrians, enemies. For his air cycle, I kept it simple, layering some gradients and different wind pattern brushes. I happen to have a lot of wind brushes left over from a previous chapter in my webcomic, so it was nice to be able to get some use out of them again. Now, of course I couldn't forget about Momo, but I wasn't sure whether I wanted him to be summonable as a companion and have the air cycle be a sprint. So I guess that's another option for powers if you prefer it. But honestly, I just don't see Momo as the combat type. I know he had that sword fight with Appa, but something tells me he's not Oz or Gyoba material. Maybe he can compete with the jellyfish, who knows. Okay, on to Katara, aka Team Mom. I always loved Katara because from the beginning she always felt like the heart of the group. Even when she wasn't always acting the most mature, you could tell she really held their dynamics together. So in this AU, I decided to make her a Hydro Catalyst user. Which, yeah, I know, technically all the Avatar characters could have used catalysts given their bending, but I just felt it suited Katara's character and storyline the most. For For her pose, I wanted something that looked powerful, but also made her look like she was able to move and flow with the water around her. I decided to use her mother's necklace as Katara's vision, since I really like the idea of Katara deriving power from her mother's necklace in a more literal sense. I will say I'm not sure how everyone will feel about me using the necklace, since it is so story integral, but like, it looks good. The designs mesh really well. I'm not changing it, I like it too much. She was also the only character that I gave a silver vision to, simply because I forgot that there could be different metal colors up until I got to her, and she was like the third one I did. For her catalyst, I decided on a waterbending scroll from that one episode where she steals one from some pirates. I thought it would be cool since we've only really seen classic books in Genshin up to this point, but to be honest, I wish I put a bit more detail into her weapon, and if I were to change it, I'd make the handles a bit more detailed and maybe add some writing on it too. Anything to add just a bit more interest. One thing I was reminded of when deciding I wanted Katara to use a catalyst in this AU was just how many Hydro Catalyst users we have at this point. Since we don't have a ton of characters that use that element in the first place, it feels a bit odd that 3 of them use catalysts, and 2 are also healers. So while I know Katara does do her fair share of healing in the show, I've actually thought of her as a support / sub DPS unit while drawing this. On to the coloring. I kept most of her outfit fairly monochromatic with different shades of blue, and I also messed around with the pattern on her dress a bit, but ultimately what I came down to was this flower pattern brush that I ended up painting green. I think they're more of a tree blossom, but I ended up referencing some water plants while coloring them, so I still think they fit. I also used some gradients throughout her outfit to just help tie the colors together since they needed a bit of coaxing. Overall, I think she's pretty cute and I would definitely wear that dress. Here I'm just doing the effects for the wave. Basically, I sketched out the general shape, slapped some water brushes on for extra splashes, and played with the transparency and blending modes, stacking on top some different layer combinations. I'm rarely ever able to give an exact description for these things because half the time I'm really just throwing things at the wall and seeing what looks good. I think overall it looks pretty cool though. On to the Melon Lord herself. So, Toph was actually the first character I drew for this series, and it's probably because I was just super confident in her pose and the general vibe I wanted for her character. So, as soon as I thought of which weapon Toph should use, I remembered this claymore in the game called the Debate Club, which is unique in that it basically looks like a bunch of rocks stacked on top of each other. Obviously, it's more refined than my description, but that's the vibe I always got. For her outfit, I combined a few of her outfits from the show and comics. I really wanted to focus on having ornate, fun trim and patterns to show off not just her familial status, but also her successes as a bender. I feel like besides Zuko, she has the most issues with her family directly, so I wanted to balance having her look wealthy, but also like she's been on the road a lot. Of course, we couldn't have her wearing shoes, so I had the ends of her pants almost coming down to cover the tops of her feet, so there wouldn't be any harsh cut off. Now, for Toph's moveset, we see in the show that from the start she's already a super powerful bender, and I could see her E-skill being a similar knockback attack to the Geo Traveler's Q, where she smashes her foot down and it just sends a wave of rocks in a radius around her. I know Geo characters are very defense oriented, so I think this skill could also put a shield around her. I imagine the goal of this skill would be to get grouped enemies off your back a bit. I wouldn't want the knockback to be too strong since one of the big objectives in Genshin is to group enemies so you can unleash AoE or other attacks easily, but I think it would be just enough to give you time to heal or rethink your attack strategy. For Toph's Q, I must say I'm a bit stumped, so I'd love your advice. I'd love for it to be somehow connected to her metal bending, but I'm unsure if that's unrealistic for Genshin canon. Either way, I'd want to keep her animations localized to geo-spreading from the earth itself. I know there's a lot of potential to have rocks flying at opponents, as they are prone to doing in Avatar, but especially with Toph, I'd like to showcase how they first come from the earth at her feet and then are used as projectiles. One effect that could be cool during her Q is if the screen went black and white, highlighting any enemy's locations, even through obstacles, as it does when she uses earthbending to see the locations of her opponents. For the pattern on her robe, skirt, cape thing, I basically took the geosigil and used that as a base and edited it to make it look like little bits of rock were flying off. I don't know, I just think it looks cool. Haha, so you may notice a change in scenery here, and while some artists may pass this off as just a fluke of technology, I assure you that no, I'm just an idiot. For those of you who watch my Twitch streams, you tend to get sneak peeks of these projects. Cough. Follow me on Twitch. Cough. So while I'm using OBS to stream, I'll use Streamlabs OBS to record. So I guess one Friday evening, I was so tired after stream that I pretty much immediately shut down my computer, only to remember seconds after it commenced shutdown that I was still recording. I cancelled it, but unfortunately the file still got corrupted, hence why you're seeing stream footage with my old Halloween overlay. And damn, this series has been slow going. Life really kicked me in the butt, huh? I also included the meteorite bracelet she got from Sokka on her arm. Personally, I would have loved to have seen more Sokka in Legend of Korra. Him and Suki really got snubbed in that series, which I guess since I'm not including him here, I'm no better, but only element-wielding characters are playable in Genshin right now. I don't know, let me know if I should have included those two. Did we miss out? For her background, I really wanted to cement her standing on the earth and everything rising around her using her abilities. I definitely reference Zhongli's splash art a ton here, especially when it gets to painting the rocks. I think those rocks were actually the only thing in the series that I decided to manually paint instead of using a bunch of blending modes, so that's cool. My painting style can be super time consuming, so besides my Monster Girl series, I won't be doing it for many character design videos. Personally, I think I'd rather give you more content with interesting designs than get caught up in the shading, but that's just me. Okay, you know who's next? The Mac Daddy Dragon of the NYC, I mean Zuko, Fireboy, gotta love him. So Zuko is actually my favorite character out of the gang. I just love his whole redemption arc, and his relationship with Iroh just makes me sob, it's too pure. But ignoring my simping, I felt that Zuko of course had to be a pyro sword user. He's shown multiple times in the show using a sword when he's undercover, and it's clear that he's just as competent using it as he is bending. For this reason, I also went with an action pose that feels as if he's between battle stances. For his clothes, I ended up having to cut a few things from the Speedpaint due to time, since during my sketching stage, I messed around a lot with his outfit. Ultimately, I ended up deciding on this partial asymmetric robe design. Obviously, symmetry and asymmetry is a big part of Zuko's design and story in the show, and I wanted to incorporate that into his outfit here. I also gave him some shin and forearm guards. I was pretty inspired by Toma while concepting Zuko's outfit, and I think you can really see it here in his pants. I did briefly consider adding the blue spirit mask in, but it really didn't work for my concept, and it just reminded me too much of Zhao, so I ended up leaving it out. For Zuko's moveset, I wanted the focus to be on speed, getting flurries of attacks in and putting an emphasis on mobility. At no time would I want the player to feel stuck in place. His stats would prioritize raw damage and crit, so Zuko would do best in crowds of lower enemies, but he could also hold his own against bosses as well with his burst. Speaking of which, I did originally want Zuko to dual wield, but since Genshin doesn't have that option in basic weapons, I've decided his Q power will be similar to Raiden's, where he changes weapons, in this case getting an extra sword and applying pyro damage and quick slashes as he attacks. In essence, Zuko would be a character that button mashers like myself would absolutely live for. For his E skill, I imagine it would be something like Zhao's, where he uses fire to propel himself forward through enemies. Given his moveset, I imagine he would spend a lot of time in the middle of a fight, so it would be beneficial to run him with additional support to group enemies together, and possibly a healer if you're a bit lazy with dodging and shields, as I tend to be. For the colors, I kept it regal with the deep reds, gold, and burgundy that he's typically seen in the show. I knew I wanted the flame pattern on the front panel hanging down, but I kind of do wish I carried it up onto his shirt for some extra added detail. Either way, I think it looks pretty good. I also strung his vision on that little side belt thing, which, to be honest, my base instinct with most of the characters was to put their vision on their hip, but I'm glad I was able to get more creative with the designs. I guess I just caved with Zuko. For his scar, I made my best effort to make it look like it does in the show, painting in some gradients using textured brushes just to make the whole thing look as natural as I could. In looking at reference for it, I was actually surprised that not only is his left eye more closed off than the right, which I already knew, but that ear is also smaller due to his burn. This was such a small detail that no one would have really expected it, so it really impressed me that the artists in the show took such care and detail when designing and animating him. For Zuko's fire effects, I basically did a similar method to Katara's water, where I built the structure using some brushes first, and just went off of that. Everything from the hair highlights to these elemental effects are all done on a glow dodge layer in CSP. I find it just gives a really nice, bright glow without sacrificing the color. I know there are other ways to get this effect too. I could just sing the praises of glow dodge all day. And with that, we're done! Let me know how you think I did and if I chose the right classes for everyone. Also, while you're down there, consider subscribing and let me know what characters you'd like to see me redesign next. Doesn't have to be Genshin related, I'd just love to hear your ideas. Huge thank you to my first $10 patron, Evil-chan, and all the links to my socials and supplies are in the description, so have a great day!